Hello, ciao, and welcome everyone. We have an exciting session lined up for you today. I'm your host, Antonio Lombardi from Edizioni LSWL, and I can't wait to dive into our conversation with the amazing Alex Osterwalder. I must say I'm particularly excited because I'm a big fan of Alex, and his work has been an endless source of inspiration for me. Hi, Alex. Thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here. Hi, everybody.
Hi. I make a brief introduction, and then we go in our conversation. Before we start, let me quickly go over some logistics. This Zoom meeting will last for approximately 30 minutes. We'll be discuss some things in business model innovation and mostly how to build resilient companies and much more. But the main topic of this live session of today is our masterclass organized by Edizioni LSWL with Alex Osterwalder, keynote speaker. This masterclass scheduled for October 10. This is a full day event. Will happen from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Cariplo factory in Milan. But we are also offering this masterclass via live streaming. So if you're joining us in Milan or tuning in from everywhere around the globe, you won't miss out. I show the website for the ticket. Okay, and sets are filling up fast. Secure your spot now by heading over to our website at the address of the website is www.modellibusiness.it. And as a special thanks for joining us today, stay tuned for exclusive benefit that we'll be sharing with our attendees in the next few hours. So now is the moment to go in our interview. Okay, I make the video of Alex bigger so it's better for everyone. Okay. So Alex, hi, how are you?
Pretty good. Getting cold in Switzerland.
Okay. I start with the first question for you. First of all, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. And I want to ask some questions for about this masterclass, and I want to tell to the attendees that they feel free to use the Zoom chat feature to submit other question to you. Thank you for your time. Alex, could you please enlighten our audience on the key topics that the masterclass Building Invincible Companies will cover? So can you give us a brief insight into one of those key topics?
Yeah, so let me actually draw something to give you an idea of what we're going to do. So I'm going to just quickly grab my iPad here. So at the end of the day, it's going to be pretty simple what we're doing. We're going to look at how to go from an idea to a real business. Let's call it a 1 billion euro business or whatever, like 100 million, 10 million, 1 million, right? And doing that could also be impact, doesn't have to be money, but going from an idea to a real thing. And what we're going to look at is how to do that. Because if you're an entrepreneur or you're a coach coaching innovation teams, well, guess what? You have to make clear that the uncertainty and risk is very high when you start with an idea. So making a business plan or so is not going to cut it. What you actually have to do systematically as an innovator, as an entrepreneur, or as a coach helping teams is to reduce risk and uncertainty. Sounds pretty obvious, right? So it's not about building something. There's this term about, minimal viable product. It's not about building a minimal viable product. It's about reducing risk. How do you do that? Very simple. Maybe the first thing you do, first experiment you run, is talking to customers and figuring out what their pain points are. Do they have a budget, etc.? And what you learn is, mostly, you're going to be wrong. At the beginning, you just failed. Great, very cheap, right? But once you've failed, you learn from that and you go to the next experiment. So maybe at one point, you make a digital prototype. Okay, a little bit more expensive, but you keep it cheap and fast. You still figure out what doesn't work. You figure out what works also. And again, you learn before building too much. So the basic idea is you reduce risk and uncertainty, and you do this with experiments, and you increase your effort, your time, the investment, maybe the money you raise as an entrepreneur over time. That's what we're going to look at. How do we do this systematically in a very practical way? So we're going to learn first how to shape our ideas, and then second, how to test our ideas. So if I kind of just give some framing to that, I'll also use wonderful slides, right? So what are we going to do? Same thing here. We're going to take this from idea to real business and look at two big tasks. How do I sketch out my business model? How do I create better business models? In particular, entrepreneurs, but also managers and people in companies, they always think product, and that's not enough. Better business models can help you grow faster, right? Going from transactional revenues of selling something to a business model with recurring revenues. So we're going to play with this task. This is the first task, business design. Ideation, sketching out business models and value propositions, assessing what is a good business model. It's not enough people understand what's a good business model. Of course, most of you know the tools we're going to use. So we're going to use the business model canvas, and we're going to go fast on the basics, but we're going to understand, how do I create a better business model? And we're going to learn about the value proposition canvas, which is about shaping my value proposition. But that's only a small part. There's one part. The second part is then, okay, if we understand this, is to test if my idea is actually going to work. And here I'm going to talk about the work that my friend and colleague Steve Blank and Eric Ries that we developed, that's showing ideas are not enough. Making business model canvas is not enough, because there's a fine line between your wonderful idea and vision as an entrepreneur, innovator, or the teams you work with. We need to actually test. So the examples I'm going to give you are things like Better Place, where they had a wonderful vision. They said, we're going to create electric vehicles that can drive into a battery charging station like behind me, and you could swap the batteries, and out they would drive. It's a wonderful value proposition. Turns out nobody wanted this. They built the entire infrastructure. Guess how much money they burnt as a startup? $850 million. So those battery swapping stations today in Denmark and Israel, they look like this. We're going to learn how to avoid these things. So I'm going to give you all of my secrets that I've learned, not just with startups, but also with large corporate enterprises, some of the most successful innovators around the world. So what we're going to avoid is the business plan phenomena or the business case phenomena, because for every wonderful spreadsheet, there's great failures, because people need to believe they're going to succeed, but they need to be humble enough to test and iterate. So we're going to learn about the second approach. The second part of business design is, how do we systematically test ideas? How do we come up with hypotheses? What are the things that need to be true for idea to work? How do we experiment? How do we reduce the risk? Simple things like interviews, not good enough, right? It's a good starting point. Other kinds of experiments. How do we learn? And then go through this again and again and again, right? So the point here is that, whoops, if I kind of draw on top of this, let me see if I can do this. So what we want to learn is how to go through this again and again and again. Business design, business models, value propositions, and testing. That's a key part of the workshop. And then the second key part, if I may, just very briefly, is going to be about understanding innovation culture. How do I create leadership support? If I have an established company, could be small or big. If I'm a coach, how to create leadership support. where should innovation live in an organization if I have one? Again, not necessarily for entrepreneurs, but as soon as you have a business. And then innovation practice is back to kind of the stuff when I'm in a company, how do I kill projects, but really how do I measure my ideas? So that's in a nutshell some of the topics, very practical examples, a lot of exercises. So now I'm talking a lot. In the workshop, you're going to work a lot, because without you working, it's a talk shop where I talk, and that's not good enough, right? So that's kind of a little bit of the overview. You're going to walk away with a lot of tools, with a very clear idea of how to do this and how to bring this back to either your startup or to your clients or to your company.
Okay, thank you, Alex. You give us a nice taste of what's ahead. Thank you. But I want to ask you now, can you share one actionable tip that participants will learn from your masterclass? One moment, I want to remember to our audience that the masterclass will be entirely translated in Italian with simultaneous translation. So see you in Milan in 10 October. So can you share one tip for the
all of it is going to be very actionable. So you're going to fill out business model canvases. You're going to understand, you're going to score businesses. You're even going to create a mini business. And then you're going to learn how to run experiments. So all of these things are extremely practical. And frankly, the biggest tip is get started with these tools. And a lot of people who come to these master classes, they've been using these tools for a long time, but because, you know, we have so much experience with this at Strategizer, there's never anybody who comes and, you know, can say, oh, I didn't learn anything new. So I try to keep it very practical, more for the beginners, but also not make it boring for those who are more experienced, because most people they know the business model canvas, but they use it in a very basic way. And that's not good enough. It's not good enough if you want to create a successful startup. And it's definitely not good enough if you're coaching startups or businesses. So you'll get the best of the best here. Like it's exactly how we apply it in companies around the world.
Okay, great. About the target audience, Alex, who do you think would benefit the most from this masterclass?
So,
in your opinion,
there are two things I'm going to look at: is how to actually do this. And that is entrepreneurs, it's companies, it's, you know, coaches who help companies or startups. So really actionable doers. I will infuse, because I do think it's important, but we can always adapt according to the people who are going to be in the room. So I'm going to look at who is the audience, you know, before I run the workshop. The other part is also leaders. If you are either an innovation leader or a CEO of a small company or maybe a bigger company, usually those don't show up, I'm going to show you how to make this concrete in your organization. I have my own company. We apply all of these tools, right? So one is the doers who are going to work on ideas. That's entrepreneurs, that's coaches, that's innovation teams. And on the other hand, leaders who need to bring this into their organizations. And of course, you know, there are a lot of people always from academia that, you know, want to learn how to teach this. So it's not going to be focused on academia, but it's going to be so practical that you can bring these stuff back to the students as well. And at the end of the day, you know, we're all students of innovation as an entrepreneur or as a leader of a larger organization.
Thank you, thank you. It sounds great. But I saw on your back the cover of your book. I am your big fan, and edizioni LS translated all of those. But about the value proposition. So if you what's the value proposition of this masterclass?
Well, when we formulate the value proposition, you always need to ask, what are your customers' jobs, pains, and gains, right? So if I'm, you know, looking at the audience, well, what is the job, pain, and gain? Well, the job is to turn an idea or some potential, a market opportunity, or to improve a product into real results. That's the job. And the pain is, well, how do I do this best? Am I doing it well? You know, oh, I already use these methodologies. nobody has the job to learn a methodology. Your job is to get from idea or market opportunity to real results more effectively, more efficiently. That's what I bring to you, is the whole kind of toolbox and methodology in a practical way, so that you can use it immediately and make more efficient decisions from idea to real business. So what it helps you do is reduce the risk of innovation, reduce the risk of your startup, so that you don't waste your time on energy and stuff that you shouldn't build. And unfortunately, still too many startups, but also large companies, they waste a lot of money on building stuff that nobody wants. This should not be anymore, because we now know how to do this. The other aspect is, some of you might be technology entrepreneurs. We fall in love with technology and products too much. So one of the big things that I like to infuse, because from idea to real business, you also want to make sure that you can create the best business possible. Another part of the value proposition is to help you come up with better business models, because too many entrepreneurs and business leaders, they think technology, products, and services, that's not good enough. What you really want to think is, how do I embed my products, services, and value propositions in a better business model? Because at the end of the day, very hard to compete on technology and products. It's practically impossible to stay ahead with all this crazy competition and technology speed. Better business models are extremely hard to disrupt. And that's not just, it's a scary term, but that's not just for large companies, it's for small companies as well. So I'm going to give you a Swiss example of a company called Lorastar. They make steam irons, right? High-end steam irons. Very hands-on. Like, this is not a technology business, it's steam irons. And they went on to figuring out a better business model around a handheld steamer. So I'm going to give you some very concrete examples that allow you to understand how to create better business models.
Yes, it is very clear. But we stay one moment on the real life examples of companies. From your book, I love the real life example of company that have successfully implemented your methodology, your strategy. Could you share some example now with our audience?
Yeah, so I think the one. Yeah, so I'll give you a couple of examples from established companies so that you understand great business models, which, from a content point of view, should inspire you. And the great examples I like there, some of them are old, some of them are new, but, just think of a crazy good one, which is the iPod. So we all think of the iPod back in the day as a technology and hardware and software innovation, which it was. But the genius of Apple back in the day around Steve Jobs was to take this iPod and to create a business model strategy around it, right? So remember, famously, he said, we can put 1,000 songs in our pocket by putting it into iTunes onto the iPod. And probably a lot of you used to put your songs there. Well, why did they do that? Because once you put all your songs into iTunes onto the iPod, you're actually locked in. What does that mean? If you go and buy a new music player, you're going to have a hard time switching to a different device, because now you have 1,000 songs in one device. Very hard to transfer 1,000 songs out of the ecosystem. So basically, that locked customers in, which allowed Apple to sell hardware again and again and again. And that was actually the foundation of the iPhone empire. So think of it. They used the technology innovation, but ultimately it was actually a business model strategy to create recurring revenues from high-end hardware. They never really earned a lot of money from music because they had to pay royalties. Most people don't know this, right? So can you replicate this in your business? You bet. This is just an illustration of a better business model. I'm going to give you the tools to actually apply this in your context. So that's a great example of one simple business model innovation. And most of them don't even need technology. So we don't need technology to do innovation. We need to create value for customers and value for businesses. That's why I'm going to also show you some Swiss examples like the Lorastar, the steam irons, and how they innovated from there.
Great, but about this copy, I have the last question. But in your opinion, now, today, what are the biggest hurdles company face when trying to innovate their business model?
So it's very simple. The first one is leaders don't really deeply understand innovation, right? When we say innovation, many leaders think technology. And they say, oh, you know, that it's not, if I'm a smaller company, oh, that's not accessible to me. Well, innovation is more value for customers and more value for business. So first of all, you just need to understand how you can come up with better value propositions and better business models. It doesn't have to be technology innovation. And there are a lot of technologies that are very, very accessible to smaller companies. I think Amazon Web Services, that made, you know, the best computing power on the planet accessible to individual startup entrepreneurs. That's number one. Number two is the commitment of the leadership. So once the leadership commits to innovation and they understand it, everything else happens on its own. So it's easier to build an innovation culture, to put in place the processes. So that becomes pretty straightforward. The biggest mistake we still see is people have a mindset of execution and they apply those rules to innovation. Innovation has different rules than execution. So you need to have these two in harmony. As a startup, it's easy because execution is not your problem. Figuring out what's the value proposition business model, finding that evidence and then scaling, execution comes after. It's very easy because you have one task, figure out a business. It's a hard task, figure out the value proposition that customers want and the business model that can scale, but it's one task. As soon as you have a business model, even in small companies, you have two tasks: run the business and invent the future. And that can be small product improvements or innovations, could be better processes, or that could be entire new business models. So understanding these two cultures and rules and how they live together, even in small companies, that's the hard part to understand. And most leaders are not quite there yet.
Great, great. So I checked the chat, but for now there isn't any further question. So we go on the end of this live session. I want to extend a huge thank you to Alex for sharing this insight for us today. And we are looking forward to the upcoming masterclass. So we'll see in Milan, October 10. Do you want to say a final message to our audience for this bigger event?
Yeah, I think, you know, this is an opportunity, right? So a lot of you might know the tools, some of you don't, but this is becoming a real profession. Like this, we now know how to do this stuff. So if you want to be a top world-class entrepreneur, you need to understand this. If you want to be a coach helping innovation teams or going into companies, you need to know this. You need to learn from there where it comes from, right? So the whole movement started with Steve Blank out of Silicon Valley, Eric Ries, his student, and us in Switzerland around the tools. So if you don't show up, you're actually not, you know, you don't want to be world-class. So I'm challenging you in saying, can you afford not to come if you want to be among the best entrepreneurs and innovators? This is the place to learn this, right? Because I'm going to share all my secrets. I want to give you everything I can. It's going to be one day, so we can't do everything. But it's also an opportunity to connect, learn from each other. So this is the place to be. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you there.
In Milan, I want a senior my copy of Business Model Generator. So,
for sure.
Okay. So I say to the audience that we will send the registration of this live session by email after maybe tomorrow. And so thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you all on October 10 in Milan.
See you in Milano.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Ciao a
Bye.
tutti. Bye.
Ciao a tutti.